I really find that line from Emma very ironic when she says, "Quit the mind games, let's get to the heart of the problem." That is just so ironic, because when we think about The Promised Neverland, and what made it so popular, and what these characters have been doing since the very beginning, they've been playing mind games with each other. That's been one of the big themes and concepts of the series that got so many people into the story, and why many seem to kind of have lost interest with the story in the first place, because we've kind of shifted away from the mind games for the most part, which that's a separate discussion entirely, and I've discussed that in separate videos already, so I'm not going to get into that. But basically, though, I find it very ironic that Emma would say something like that. I feel like the writers were saying it because they know full well that, that's what the series kind of started off with. Anyways, though, let's talk about the opening of the chapter. We have a dream sequence. The man with no name, he is in the middle of a dream. And in this dream, we see where he is thinking about his failures. He's thinking about what he could have done, what he should have done. And we also see everyone that he lost. And we see that he's still, to this day, very pained by it, because it was considered a nightmare in this sense when you see that image, and you see the start of the chapter. We know it's a nightmare, and that shows that the man, to this very day, he blames himself, he's upset, he has lost everything. And that right there is just a bad case of PTSD. That's what it is. I mean, we already knew that's what he had because of how he was talking to himself and how he was, like, having his own tea party and stuff in his head, and Emma, even criticized him on that a while back, like 10 or so chapters ago. We know for a fact that this man isn't all there, but seeing inside of his head, it kind of shows an insight to his character and what led him to be like he is. And it's exactly what we all expected. I mean, we all knew for a fact the reason why he treats the kids like he does, for instance, Emma and Ray, and why he doesn't want to interact with them, why he doesn't want to know them, is because, number one, he is afraid. He is very afraid to get to know someone and then lose them like that. He just doesn't want to deal with the experience of loss ever again, which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you were scarred that bad, you had people you grew up with for a long time, and then you finally escaped, and you thought you finally had freedom, you're going to get to go to the human world. Obviously, you're just going to feel destroyed when you realize you've lost everything. You're the last one standing. You're just going to be completely crushed. Even having so much time, years to think on it, that's just going to become a lot worse. And, I mean, as I've already said in the past, us humans, we are social creatures. Without human interaction, we will eventually go crazy. That's just how we are. And him being by himself for so long, him, having time to process everything, he most likely every single day, every time he woke up out of bed, and he was probably preparing himself some food or whatever, looking at monitors or reading a book, he probably thought at the very least one time per day about the things he lost. And so it explains why he acts like he does. He's became so distant, closed off, and his heart's just shut down to where he just doesn't want to open it up ever again, because he doesn't want to experience what he's already lost. And every time he looks at Emma, every time he looks at Ray, every time he looks at the children, he sees a younger version of himself. And that is the clarification we get in this chapter. So with the nightmare scene, we see that this man, at one point in time, he was the Emma of the group. It's clear as day now, when you see how he was looking at his friends and all that, and then he looked at everybody dead, he was clearly the Emma. He was clearly the one that was very naive. He was clearly the one that pushed everyone forward to save everyone, to bring them to a brighter future. He was the equivalent of Emma. And so it makes perfect sense why he doesn't like the way Emma and Ray act, because Emma is like what he was many years ago, but she has yet to lose this. In some ways, he might be sick because he blames himself and he's just upset with how someone could go down the same path as him and be so naive, but also at the same time, he just wants the person to learn from that mistake. And so in this case, when he was thinking about who he needs to get rid of in this chapter, most likely, many might assume it's Emma, but I think it's actually Ray that he wants to get rid of, and let me explain why. The reason why he'd probably want to get rid of Ray is because he knows for a fact Emma is very similar to how he is. And so if she was to lose that hope, that, drive to continue to press forward, in turn, it would shatter everyone else that's back at, the shelter. So it makes perfect sense why he would want to get rid of Ray, because it would break her, because he's like the one that keeps her on track. I mean, he's like the tracks and she is the cart. He's the one kind of leading her down the proper path, but she's the one that's the bright light on, the track. That's what Emma is. And if he gets rid of the tracks, which is Ray, then he wins, because Emma won't be able to go anywhere. She'll be stuck in her position, never to move forward down the tracks, because she will lose her hope, her only ray of light, which pun definitely intended. So I gotta say, I feel like that's where the writer wants to take it, because he wants Emma to learn that she is very naive, and this is something that's been with her character since the very beginning. We all know, if you've been paying attention to The Promised Neverland, we all know for a fact that Emma is a type of character that is very naive. She is someone that is like a stereotypical shonen character. She's very naive, she wants to save people, but we have seen times with her character to where she breaks that mold of a standard shonen character, and does something that's a little bit warped and twisted. I mean, especially after she found out what Ray did a long time ago, when he was letting some of the kids go and die, just for the grand in-game goal. She's like, never do that again. And then, what happened to Norman and all that, just all these little scenes, how she cut off her ear. She has shown sides of her that's not necessarily naive, but she has able to kind of push out of that sometimes, and I feel like if she was to have that side, that little part of her removed, she would be an insane character. She would be crazy, and I would be very interested to see where she would go if that was indeed to happen, if she was to not be naive any longer. So, getting back into the chapter, okay, the relevant stuff of this chapter, most of it is basically just a montage. That's what the chapter is. It's clarifying that ever since the first day, when the man with no name gave them a trap and all that brought more demons in, he hasn't really tried to attack them at all, and everything's kind of been peaceful. I mean, they barely gotten sleep, they managed to save ammunition, they have learned how to be a little bit more stealthy, use their bullets wisely, how to rest and get food and all that. They're learning while watching the man, which is what's been happening for many chapters now. They're learning while watching, and this man isn't teaching them, they're just learning by paying attention to what he's doing, which is a lot better. Hands-on experience is a lot better than someone writing it down for you or telling you about it. I mean, have you ever heard that saying? Like, if you're wanting to learn something, it's better to get hands-on experience. It's kind of like this, okay? Okay, let's take for an example this. Let's say someone tells you how to chop down a tree. You take an axe, you go hit a tree, and you're like, okay, so that's how you chop down a tree. Okay, well, let's say one day, even though you heard that experience, you didn't really ever have experience with chopping down a tree, you wouldn't really know about how to chop a tree down. You'd think it'd be very simple. Just hit the tree till it falls down. But that isn't necessarily the case of chopping down a tree. When you chop down a tree, you gotta hit it in a certain way, and then you gotta angle it away to where it'll fall down a certain way that doesn't hit anything. And if you never had hands-on experience and seen it firsthand, obviously you wouldn't really know. You wouldn't understand how to handle, especially with how wind is and all of that. So that's an example. Someone telling you something and then you doing it are completely two separate things. They're completely different, and that's basically what's going on. Emma and Ray, they're learning hands-on how to handle living out in the wild and dealing with demons, running away from demons, scavenging for food, so forth, so on. And so most of that part of the chapter was kind of the same stuff we've been going through in the recent chapter, so nothing really to dive too deeply into. So the last part of the chapter, the destination is about to be met in one day's time. So around next chapter, basically, we will have Goldie Pond upon us, and Ray and Emma will arrive with the man with no name. Now, we know for a fact that the man with no name, he wants to initiate something. He wants to get rid of one of them, and as I said, I'm assuming it's Ray. So I'm not going to go back into that, because I've already discussed it in this video. But they finally are about to make it, and this is what I'm very curious about, okay? And it actually brings up a very good discussion and a topic for this chapter when you think about it. This man obviously has been down this path before. He has been down the long path and the short path. For him to know the paths that are not on the map, that means he has been at Goldie Pond. But the question is why has he not got in that shelter? That is the big question. That is what all of us need to be asking right now. Like, if there really is a shelter, which we could assume at the very least one point in time there was a shelter, but for there to be a shelter there, why has he not went in it? Unless it's not possible to access it. Either A, he couldn't find it, B, he just couldn't get to it because it's just surrounded by maybe demon settlements. Maybe demon settlements are like all over it, and you know, maybe they built over the shelter and then, like, the original entrance or whatever was lost. Or 3, maybe he just never wanted to open it up because of everything that happened in the past with, you know, his friends, how he lost his entire family, something like that. The question is, though, besides all of that, if there really is something dangerous there, how are they going to handle it? Because we know for a fact that there's something to do with poachers. Poachers are a big thing. And we know that's a big plot point for this arc. So I'm kind of curious to see where this is going to go and why this man has never tried to go into that shelter and then move onward. Because, I mean, even if you're, you know, messed up mentally, eventually you're going to want to do something. You're eventually going to want to press on. That's just how it is. Yes, he lost his hope. Yes, he lost his, you know, his tracks and all of that. But, I mean, if you're by yourself for years, eventually you're going to want to do something. You eventually want to experiment and probably check something out. So, even after he lost everybody, most likely, he had to have at the very least checked it out. And maybe he gave up because of what he saw. One or the other. So, yeah, I just wanted to point that out. So, that's about it when it comes to this chapter of The Promised Neverland. Emma's trying to communicate with the man, say, like, cut the mind games, let's talk with this guy, and that's about it. So, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love you all so much. If you enjoy my content, obviously, please subscribe, and if you like this video, please, you know, leave a like, and tell me how you feel about this chapter. Let me know with the comments down below. Love you guys, please be safe, Chibi out.